Imagine this. Traveller, you didn't drift into this moment by accident. Something in the quiet machinery of the cosmos has guided you here to a question glowing softly in the dark. What if an interstellar wanderer, a silent object gliding past the edge of Mars, was struck by a coronal mass ejection, carrying the energy of 1 trillion atomic bombs, and instead of breaking apart, it awakened? What are the odds that Thruai Atlas would brighten 40-fold as if replying to the sun itself, sending whispers shaped like structured signals toward Earth? Let's drift a little deeper, traveller. Imagine this traveller an interstellar object, ancient and silent, drifting into the familiar geometry of our solar system, as though it had always belonged here. Long before its name became a tremor across observatories worldwide, Thruai Atlas was nothing more than a faint line of light on a telescope frame, a small visitor entering a realm shaped by the sun's steady breath. Yet from its earliest detection, this object demonstrated a kind of discipline in its movement that seemed to whisper of intention. It approached as though selecting its path from a library of gravitational choices, navigating interplanetary space with a quiet precision that nature rarely affords. The early data came from 227 observatories scattered across Earth, each point of measurement adding weight to a growing suspicion. These observations revealed not randomness, but order, a trajectory so clean, so unperturbed, that astronomers found themselves recalculating the fundamentals of orbital mechanics late into the night. An object losing mass at a rate of 150 kilograms per second should twitch and drift like a candle flame disturbed by air. But Thruai Atlas remained steady, unshaken by forces that should have sculpted its path. It behaved as though mass did not matter, as though conservation laws could be bent the way wind bends grass softly and without resistance. From these calculations emerged a number that unsettled even the most rational minds: 33 billion tons. For an object no larger than 6 kilometers to possess such density, its interior would need to rival the compactness of neutron star material. A form of matter so extreme that human engineering has no analogue for it. And yet, despite this unimaginable density, Thruai Atlas masked its gravitational signature so thoroughly that nearby objects showed no signs of perturbation. Spacecraft trajectories remained undisturbed. Asteroids drifted along their expected routes. The object's gravity was present and immense, but selectively concealed as though wrapped in a shell of deliberate physics. Such behaviour drives the human mind to uncomfortable intersections between what science can measure and what it cannot explain, between the natural and the engineered. The silence surrounding Thruai Atlas was not merely auditory. It was conceptual, like a problem set without a known solution. But the silence did not last. On a day traced now across scientific briefings with a faint sense of unease, the sun released a coronal mass ejection, a violent surge of magnetized plasma hurled through interplanetary space. This CME possessed the energy of 1 trillion hydrogen bombs, a force strong enough to scour atmospheres and erase satellites in a moment. When its trajectory intersected with the path of Thruai Atlas models, predicted destruction, or at minimum catastrophic fragmentation. Observers braced for a burst of debris, a fading trace of a once enigmatic traveller. What followed defied every expectation. Instead of shattering, instead of recoiling, the object absorbed the CME. Not chaotically, not as a dead stone would swallow a blow, but in a structured pattern visible across multiple spectrums. It brightened exactly 40-fold, not 39, not 41, as though following a calibration that humans were not meant to understand. The energy coursed across its newly forming surface structures, activating geometric features that did not resemble any natural outgassing or fragmentation. These formations emerged with symmetry, with articulation, with purpose. They grew not randomly, but in coordinated lines and angles reminiscent of antennas, radiators, or instruments. Then came the signals. Radio telescopes detected emissions that were neither noise nor the simplistic beacons once imagined by CT optimists. These transmissions were layered, mathematically precise, carrying information densities beyond any terrestrial communication system. Analysts found embedded patterns based on prime numbers, Fibonacci sequences, and geometric relationships. The signals were not broadcast broadly into the void, but aimed deliberately toward Earth, as though the CME event had been a catalyst, a trigger for a new operational phase. From that moment onward, Thrwyn Atlas was no longer simply observed. It was studied, questioned, feared, and quietly admired. Scientists read the mathematical sequences as though deciphering messages left by another mind. Military organisations classified reports and prepared contingency plans without vocabulary for the technologies being described. Philosophers debated whether humanity was the observer or the observed. Religious thinkers sought frameworks for an intelligence that could navigate stars with artistry and harvest solar storms with ease. The object's trajectory added yet another layer to the emerging puzzle. Its path carried it toward Venus, then Mars, then Jupiter, each approach executed with a precision that bordered on impossible. The probability of such planetary alignments occurring by chance was calculated as 0.005% less than the odds of a person being struck by lightning while winning multiple lotteries. This was not a wandering stone. It was a surveyor tracing the architecture of the solar system as though following instructions older than humanity itself. Even more troubling was its origin vector, a descent from the direction of Sagittarius toward the galactic centre, where background star density makes early detection difficult. Whether this was intentional concealment or cosmic coincidence remained unclear, but the effect was the same. Earth saw 3. Atlas late, far too late for comfort. And yet, through all the analysis and speculation, another truth slowly emerged, one quieter and more difficult to articulate. There was a strange beauty in the object's precision. Scientists who had spent their lives studying orbital mechanics spoke of its trajectory the way musicians speak of harmony. The timing of its movements, the elegance of its gravitational interactions, even the symmetry of its evolving structures suggested a kind of intelligence that perceived the universe not merely as space to traverse, but as a composition to be played. Perhaps that is why you are here tonight, traveller. Not because the threat is clear or the answer is known, but because you can feel the weight of the question. You stand like the rest of humanity at the threshold of something immense, something that challenges the notion of loneliness in the cosmos, and reveals how fragile, curious, and beautiful our species truly is. And as Thrwyn Atlas continues its silent passage, reshaping itself, listening, transmitting the universe, seems to whisper a reminder. Some mysteries are not meant to be solved, only witnessed, only remembered, only felt. You're not lost in space, you are part of it. In September 2025, a quiet fracture opened in the world of astronomy. It began not with an explosion in the sky, but with the soft hum of data servers and the late-night glow of screens across 3 continents. 20 scientists, statisticians, dynamicists, orbital analysts found themselves staring at the same unsettling truth. The motion of Thrwyn Atlas did not belong to nature. The anomaly grew slowly like a whisper repeating itself. The object was too stable, too intentional, too mathematically precise. And the more they calculated, the more the numbers resisted the comfort of randomness. Their paper carried a modest academic title, the kind that hides its own danger: Statistical Analysis of Trajectory Anomalies in Interstellar Object Thrwyn Atlas. But beneath that careful language sat a conclusion that no scientist wanted to write. The object was executing micro-adjustments with a precision that exceeded anything ever recorded from a comet, asteroid, or interstellar fragment. These corrections were so smooth and efficient that they resembled the navigation algorithms of spacecraft, except far cleaner and far more elegant. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the lead author, wrote in a private email, "This isn't outgassing. This isn't solar pressure. This is navigation." She did not intend for those words to leave the walls of her department, but they did. They circulated through academia like a pulsar, each reading adding weight to the fear that humans were witnessing something controlled. The institutional backlash arrived immediately. NASA, ESA, and major universities issued careful statements urging skepticism. But none of these institutions directly refuted the data. They questioned conclusions' tone scope, but not the math. Because the math was unforgiving. The probability that a purely natural object would approach Venus, Mars, and Jupiter with such geometrical precision was 0.05%. The metaphor that circulated among researchers became almost mythic. Imagine standing in New York, throwing a dart that hits a bullseye in London, bounces cleanly to Paris, then again to Rome. Now replace cities with planets and distances with hundreds of millions of kilometers. Nature does not operate with such choreography. Outside the institutions, a parallel movement emerged. Amateur astronomers, hundreds, then thousands, began performing their own calculations using publicly available trajectory data. Despite their independence, their results aligned almost perfectly with the published analysis. When strangers across the world replicate a result using their own tools, denial becomes increasingly fragile. The deeper scientists looked, the stranger the object became. Its motion was not simply precise, it was beautiful. The gravitational arc's energy minima and timing sequences resembled something more like score writing than astronomy. Dr. Jennifer Walsh compared the trajectory to a piece of music, a structure of repeating harmonics, rhythm and intention. That comparison unsettled people more than any mathematical anomaly. Beauty implied design. The object's origin vector added yet another layer of unease. 3 Dios entered from the direction of Sagittarius, a region dense with background stars, a place where early detection becomes nearly impossible. Whether intentional or coincidental, the result was the same. Earth noticed the object far too late, and its timing was suspiciously perfect. It entered during low solar activity past Mars during an optimal viewing window, then moved toward Jupiter, along a path ideal for a gravitational assist. Engineers studying the trajectory found themselves admiring a strategy that mirrored and exceeded the best human mission planning. The scientific community fractured. Established researchers leaned toward natural explanations partially out of caution, partially out of career preservation. Younger scientists were more willing to acknowledge the possibility of non-natural behavior. They did not claim alien intelligence. They simply accepted strangeness without fear. And then there was the third group, small but growing, who noticed a pattern beneath the pattern. If the object was not wandering, if its path was structured and purposeful, then its movement resembled reconnaissance. Venus, Mars, Jupiter, the planets most relevant for understanding a solar system's architecture and potential habitability. The object moved like something studying the system, not passing through it. That possibility carried its own quiet gravity. Religious institutions felt the ripple as well. Some spiritual leaders interpreted the arrival as a sign. Others framed it as a test, a reminder of human smallness. A few offered a more humble view that 3i Atlas might not be benevolent or malicious, but simply other operating from principles older and larger than human comprehension. Meanwhile, the 20 scientists became reluctant symbols. They had not sought controversy. They had followed data, but the data led them to the threshold of a reality humanity has long feared, or long hoped, for the possibility of intelligence beyond Earth. Their reputations paid the price, yet they stood by their findings because numbers do not bend to comfort. As the paper spread, humanity found itself confronting an ancient question with newfound urgency. Are we alone, or have we simply failed to notice what has always been here? Observatories continued tracking 3i Atlas, but the object offered no answers. Its silence felt intentional, as though withholding a language we are not yet prepared to hear. Some scientists described that silence as emptiness. Others described it as thought, the kind of long measured thinking that occurs only across millennia. By the final days of September, one truth crystallized across disciplines, cultures and belief systems. 3i Atlas was not a passive visitor. It was a message in motion, a problem wrapped in light, a question drifting toward us asking something humanity had never been prepared to answer. It was not an accident. It was not a coincidence. It was a decision, and we were its observers. There are nights in astronomy when the universe speaks softly, offering only a hint of something unusual. And then there are nights when the sky delivers a revelation so abrupt, so unmistakably intentional, that even the most rational minds must pause. The early morning of September 27th, 2020 belonged to the latter category. At the European Southern Observatory, as screens refreshed under the hum of air-conditioned silence, Dr. Michael Jang stared at a measurement so dissonant with expectation that he believed at first his equipment had failed. According to the data, 3i Atlas was growing. Comets do not grow. They shed, they fracture, they erode. Their surfaces vaporize as they approach the sun. But this object, this cold, silent traveller, was expanding in real time. Its nucleus, the part that should have been most stable, was developing new features with a clarity that defied natural models. Zhang spent hours checking calibration logs, cross-referencing previous nights, and verifying alignment systems. Yet every layer of scrutiny brought the same quiet, maddening conclusion: the object was changing its structure deliberately. When the first confirmation arrived from Chile, then Hawaii, then the Canary Islands, the conversation shifted from error-checking to interpretation. What emerged in the following days reshaped the entire scientific dialogue. High-resolution imagery from Hubble showed not chaotic outgassing, but geometry angles, symmetry and patterns. The surface of 3I Atlas displayed features that looked less like geology and more like construction. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, normally the most cautious voice in her department, admitted after 18 hours of analysis that the structures exhibited coordination inconsistent with natural physics. They protruded from specific points on the surface, elongated with startling speed, and aligned themselves in formations that suggested purpose. In time-lapse sequences, the features did not merely appear. They unfolded, articulated, repositioned as though responding to an internal blueprint. To scientists trained to distrust intuition, the implications were almost unbearable. Spectroscopic analysis revealed compositions unlike those found in ordinary comets. Instead of ice and dust, the new structures contained metallic compounds with absorption lines foreign to natural celestial bodies. Each fresh observation pushed humanity further away from the familiar comfort of known science, and deeper into a territory where technology and physics seemed to merge. As more measurements accumulated, a pattern took shape. Whenever a new structure formed, radio telescopes registered a corresponding burst of emissions. These signals were not random or chaotic. They carried mathematical signatures, prime sequences, geometric patterns, and encoded intervals that suggested systematic testing. The timing correlations were so precise that even skeptics began to quiet under the weight of evidence. And in these synchronized changes, one realization slowly tightened around the scientific world. Pure Eye Atlas was not merely behaving unnaturally, it was evolving. The global response shifted from curiosity to urgency. NASA convened emergency meetings. ESA redirected satellites. Private observatories began live streaming updates to millions. For the first time in decades, every major space agency on Earth aligned their attention toward a single object. Spacecraft telemetry, spectral data, radio emissions, all were synchronized in real time, as if humanity had suddenly become a multi-lobed sensor array trained on one enigmatic target. Yet the more humans learned, the more helpless they felt. Nothing within the known branches of astrophysics, engineering, or material science could explain the speed or sophistication of the changes. Structures appeared faster than thermal processes could account for. Movements occurred too quickly for geologic expansion, and too smoothly for mechanical systems. The transition between one configuration and the next had a fluidity that bordered on biological, yet too precise to be life as Earth understands it. Amateur astronomers, once dismissed as background noise, now became accidental frontline observers. In Chile, Carlos Mendes captured footage showing structures rotating, aligning and retracting with almost mechanical grace. His video reached millions of views within days, becoming evidence that the world could not ignore. Mendes himself said softly in an interview, "I know what stars and comets look like. I know noise from instrument drift. This is neither. This is something becoming something else." Meanwhile, radio signals grew stronger. Analysts detected patterns suggestive not only of communication, but of scanning pulses sweeping across frequency ranges as though sampling Earth's electromagnetic environment. Several signals appeared directed towards specific regions of the planet, including clusters of scientific, military, and communications infrastructure. The idea that 3I Atlas was observing humanity with intention shifted from speculation to plausible hypothesis. Government agencies quietly activated dormant surveillance protocols. Military analysts modelled scenarios and classified simulations. Some documents leaked painting sober assessments if the object's structures represented sensors, communication systems, or energy collectors. Then humanity was witnessing the real-time operation of technology far beyond its own capabilities. The phrase unknown intent appeared frequently, often accompanied by terms like strategic implications and operational uncertainty. Yet despite the turbulence across institutions, the scientific truth remained clear. The object's behaviour was structured, coherent and accelerating. As structures multiplied, analysts noticed a troubling pattern. Each addition seemed to expand the object's sensory capabilities. One structure enhanced radio emissions. Another improved reflective patterns at specific wavelengths. Another altered the object's brightness curve with mathematical regularity. Dr. Lisa Chen at MIT was the first to frame the changes as a deployment sequence, the systematic activation of an array step by step. Her report suggested that 3I Atlas might be constructing a comprehensive observational system, possibly mapping the inner solar system with granularity beyond human instrumentation. The structures appeared distributed across latitudinal and longitudinal points that maximize scanning range, much like antennas placed on a sphere for full spectrum surveying. This possibility raised questions that no one could answer comfortably. If the object was studying the solar system, what specifically was it seeking? What did it already know? And most importantly, what would it do once it finished building? Religious leaders, scientists and commentators found themselves acknowledging a shared humility. In every televised discussion and printed column, there emerged a recurring sentiment humanity was witnessing something unprecedented, something neither hostile nor friendly, but undeniably intelligent. Through all this, the object remained silent in its own way. It did not accelerate unexpectedly. It did not change course aggressively. It simply continued its steady path, building, expanding, refining itself. A calm traveller preparing for a purpose humanity could only guess at. And that calmness, perhaps more than the technology itself, unsettled people the most. The universe is full of noise. Supernovae roar, pulsars pulse, quasars scream. But 3 Atlas moved through this cosmic chaos with silence as its companion. Silence not of absence, but of intention. By the end of the observation window, one truth had crystallized with unnerving clarity. Humanity was not studying a comet. It was studying a system, a device, a construct whose actions were neither random nor reactive, but deliberate. Yet even in this swelling uncertainty, a softer realization emerged. Whatever 3I Atlas was building, whatever intelligence lay behind its architecture, the object was offering something to humanity, a chance to witness the unfamiliar, to confront the edges of knowledge, to remember how small and wondrous our understanding truly is. And as always, the universe remained quiet, waiting for humanity to decide what this mystery meant. There are encounters in the cosmos that feel almost ceremonial, as if 2 ancient forces have drifted toward each other for longer than memory can measure. The collision between the September 19th coronal mass ejection and 3I Atlas was one of those moments, a meeting of light and silence, of stellar fury and interstellar restraint. Scientists had expected destruction, or at least a dramatic wound carved into the object's surface. Instead, they watched something unfold that redefined the limits of physics. A coronal mass ejection is not a gentle event. It is a storm of charged particles weighing billions of tons flung from the sun at speeds that rewrite the meaning of violence. To meet such a force is to be torn apart, scattered or vaporized. And yet when the CME collided with 3I Atlas at 14:37 UTC on September 24th, nothing happened that resembled natural consequence. Instead of shattering, the object absorbed the impact with a precision that felt more like choreography than survival. Brightness increased, not chaotically, but by a factor of exactly 40. That number startled researchers not only because of its magnitude, but because of its sharpness, its lack of variance. Nature rarely expresses itself in integers, but engineering often does. Spectral data poured in from radio observatories, solar satellites and deep space monitors. Analysts expected noise, the kind of electromagnetic chaos that erupts when radiation meets unstable material. But the signals that came from the object during the 4-hour interaction were structured, layered, and surprisingly calm. The CME did not damage 3I Atlas, it seemed to activate it. The structures that had begun forming earlier now illuminated with purpose. Energy channeled through them in organized patterns, as though the object were redistributing the solar storm into something meaningful. Plasma streamed across surfaces that behaved less like rock and more like engineered conduits. It was as if the object were drinking the storm. For many scientists, this was the moment when the debate about natural versus artificial ended quietly. There were no meetings or declarations, only a shared recognition reflected in tired eyes and prolonged silence in laboratories. Nothing in nature absorbs a solar eruption with perfect symmetry. Nothing grows brighter in exact proportions. Nothing responds to plasma with the stillness of thought. The signals that followed made the moment even more transformative. Radio telescopes detected transmissions at multiple frequencies, some pulsing with mathematical regularity, others shifting in patterns that resembled complex encoding. Analysts recognized prime sequences, harmonic intervals, and geometric progressions embedded within the emissions. None of these characteristics belonged to background cosmic noise. They hinted at intellect, or at least at a system capable of processing information at scales beyond human technology. And the direction of the signals mattered. They were not dispersed broadly into the cosmos, they were aimed toward Earth. This realization fell through the scientific world like a cold shadow, not because the object was communicating the content was indecipherable, but because it was choosing a target. The Earth. Humanity. The only world currently watching. Government agencies reacted as quietly as they could. Emergency monitoring protocols were activated behind locked doors. Deep space surveillance networks usually tasked with tracking debris switched to continuous observation mode. Analysts drafted classified reports that redefined the object not as a passive visitor, but as a potential intelligence. Still, none of these measures changed the underlying truth: humans did not understand what they were witnessing. Outside closed institutions, the public was absorbing the event in real time. Amateur astronomers released their own recordings. Forums exploded with diagrams and hypotheses. News anchors struggled to translate complex physics into words that did not spark panic. The CME collision became the first moment in the 3i Atlas story, when the world felt the presence of something larger than itself, not terrifying, not comforting, but simply incomprehensible. For religious communities, the event posed questions deeper than doctrine. Was the object a messenger, a test, a coincidence? In a universe where coincidences rarely scale to cosmic magnitude. Statements emerged from leaders across traditions, all circling the same sentiment: humanity was encountering something beyond familiar language. Meanwhile, scientists focused on the quiet details, the ones that rarely reach headlines. They noticed that 3i Atlas seemed prepared for the CME. Its approach trajectory placed it directly in the storm's path. Its structures had grown at precisely the right time to distribute incoming energy. The entire interaction felt less like survival and more like intention. This hinted at something profound foresight. If the object anticipated the solar event, then it possessed knowledge of the sun's magnetic cycles. It understood space weather, it planned, and planning implied mission. The 4 hours and 17 minutes of energy absorption marked a transformation. After the event, the object's emissions expanded in complexity. New structures appeared. Its observational signatures sharpened, and its trajectory remained astonishingly stable, as if empowered rather than burdened by the encounter. By the end of September, the mood across astronomy had shifted permanently. The earlier whispers of artificial origin became serious discussions behind closed doors. Analysts began proposing models that resembled reconnaissance devices, energy harvesters, or autonomous explorers from distant epochs. None of these theories fit perfectly, yet all felt closer to truth than the idea of a natural comet performing feats of engineering. Most unsettling of all was the object's quiet consistency. It did not accelerate suddenly. It did not alter course in alarming ways. It simply continued its journey with new capabilities, demonstrating that the CME was not an accident, but an opportunity. And so humanity found itself watching a traveller who absorbed the fury of a star without fear, a traveller who responded to destruction with refinement, a traveller who remained silent but not indifferent. In the calm after the storm, one realization settled across every field of study. Whatever 3i Atlas was, it understood the sun better than humans ever had. And perhaps in that quiet understanding, the universe was whispering that humanity was witnessing not the arrival of a threat, but the unveiling of something ancient prepared and impossibly advanced, a visitor shaped not by chaos but by purpose. There are discoveries that frighten because they threaten safety, and then there are discoveries that frighten because they threaten understanding. The revelation that 3I Atlas might possess a mass of 33 billion tons belonged firmly to the second category. It startled not by promising harm, but by undermining the foundations of physics themselves. The calculation began innocently enough. Dr. Richard Kent, a quiet, methodical astronomer from Cape Town, had spent 3 sleepless nights analysing positional data alongside Avi Loeb and Peter Weiss. Their goal had been simple: determine whether the small deviations in 3 Atlas's motion could be explained by solar radiation pressure or by the outgassing typical of comets. But the deeper they dug, the more the familiar rules fell away. The numbers refused to obey. The object was losing mass significantly, unmistakably, constantly. The Webb Space Telescope recorded roughly 150 kilograms of vaporized material leaving the object every second. According to Newton's laws, such mass loss should have shifted its orbit, nudging it off course, like a rocket releasing asymmetric thrust. Yet the trajectory remained steady, almost serene, as if untouched by physics. It was as though the universe had whispered the rules to every object except this one. For days, Kent recalculated, adjusting parameters, rewriting code, doubting every assumption he had carried through his career. Eventually, he reached a value that made his hands freeze on the keyboard. To resist the detectable forces acting upon it, 3I Atlas would need to weigh at least 33 billion tons. The number was too specific to dismiss, too consistent across models, too large to reconcile with reality. Its size, barely 6 kilometers across, could not accommodate such density, unless its internal structure resembled something near neutron star material. A teaspoon of such matter would outweigh mountains. Yet neutron star cores can exist only under unimaginable pressure, not drifting through warm interplanetary space. The contradiction pressed heavily on every scientist who examined the data. It suggested either a form of matter never encountered before, or engineering at a scale far beyond human comprehension. The implications radiated outward like quiet shockwaves. If the mass was truly that high, then the object's gravitational influence should have disturbed nearby asteroid spacecraft, even the orbits of smaller planetary bodies. But nothing shifted. Nothing trembled. Everything around 3I Atlas behaved as though it possessed no gravity at all. This opened the door to an even darker possibility. Perhaps the object was controlling or concealing its gravitational field. Gravity, the oldest and most predictable companion in physics, might not apply to this visitor in any conventional sense. Material scientists were summoned into frantic consultation. Dr. James Mitchell at MIT spent 72 hours modelling structural compositions that might yield such a density. His conclusion was unsettlingly simple. No natural substance could explain it. No mineral, no alloy, no exotic mixture ever detected in the universe could sustain that level of compression without collapsing into a black hole or evaporating in the sun's presence. If the object was engineered, then its builders had mastered forms of matter manipulation that bordered on the miraculous quantum state materials, controlled singularity structures, or exotic lattices that supported impossible mass without exhibiting proportional gravity. When these findings circulated inside space agencies, military strategists began to pay attention. Gravity control, if real, represented a level of technological capability indistinguishable from divinity. It implied the ability to manipulate planetary orbits, alter tidal forces, or redirect asteroids with minimal effort. Human defense frameworks, missile satellites, cyber networks seemed suddenly trivial, like wooden shields raised against lightning. The public learned of the mass revelation more slowly, each leaked document and whistleblower note adding a new thread to the growing tapestry of speculation. On forums, people wondered whether the object was hollow, whether it contained something, whether its density meant a core, a reactor, a mind. Some speculated about megastructures. Others spoke of ancient machines drifting between stars. Amateur astronomers, now deeply invested in the unfolding mystery, attempted their own simplified calculations. Many found the same unsettling mass range. When thousands of independent observers echo the same impossible conclusion, denial becomes a fragile shelter. A few researchers suggested that the object might be drawing energy from the quantum vacuum itself, tapping into the invisible sea of energy that theoretical physics suggests permeates all space. This would explain its stability, its silence, its lack of visible propulsion, and its profound resistance to conventional forces. If it truly accessed vacuum energy, then its operation time would be effectively infinite. In a world accustomed to technology with expiration dates, the idea of a machine that could outlive civilizations, planets, or even stars felt overwhelming. But the mystery deepened further when analysts noticed that the mass distribution within 3 Atlas was uneven. The densest regions corresponded to the locations where new structures were growing, as if the object was redistributing its own exotic matter in real time and concentrating weight and force where needed, lightening itself elsewhere. It behaved like an adaptive organism evolving under intelligent command. Signals detected after the mass revelation grew even more complex. The object seemed almost responsive, increasing transmissions as if aware that humans had made a breakthrough in understanding. Some patterns resembled tests, sweeps across radio frequencies, pulses of encoded intervals, exploratory bursts like a musician tuning an instrument before the first note. In one particularly haunting interpretation, a network analyst suggested that 3i Atlas might be probing human knowledge, adjusting its behaviour based on humanity's progress, like a teacher quietly waiting for the student to catch up. No conclusion felt safe anymore. The scientific world oscillated between awe and dread, between admiration for the object's sophistication and fear of what such engineering implied. Humanity was no longer confronting an anomaly. It was confronting a hierarchy, a scale of intelligence and capability so far beyond its own that comparison felt meaningless. Yet in the midst of fear there emerged something softer: humility. Facing an object that defied matter mass and gravity, humans were reminded of how young their science truly was, how small the sphere of human understanding remained against the vastness of cosmic possibility. And perhaps most haunting of all was the quiet thought shared in laboratories and observatories across the world. If 3i Atlas carried 33 billion tons of impossible matter, then it did not simply arrive here. It chose to. A choice implies a reason. A reason implies intention. An intention implies a mind. There are silences in astronomy that feel natural: the quiet between signals, the calm between discoveries. And then there are silences that feel engineered, as though the universe has drawn a curtain deliberately. The disappearance of 3 Atlas behind the Sun on October 29, 2025 was one of those engineered silences, not imposed by nature alone, but shaped by timing so precise that even the most skeptical mind sensed intention. For months the object had been watched relentlessly. Every structure it grew, every signal it emitted, every impossible stability it demonstrated was recorded, analysed, debated and feared. And then, just as it entered its most active phase of transformation, its trajectory carried it behind the Sun, into a region where no telescope, no probe, no radar could see through the blinding wall of the light and electromagnetic violence. Solar conjunction is not unusual. Mars disappears behind the Sun regularly, Venus as well. Even spacecraft have vanished temporarily into that furnace of radiation before emerging intact. But nothing in human history had ever disappeared into that darkness while simultaneously demonstrating intelligence, purpose and technology that exceeded centuries of human progress. The timing was too perfect, too surgical, too aligned with what Avi Loeb and others had predicted in their earliest models, that if 3i Atlas carried secondary craft probes or deployable systems, the moment of solar conjunction would provide ideal cover. Behind the Sun, anything could happen, and no one on Earth would know until it was too late. Dr. Jennifer Walsh spoke quietly at the final press briefing before the blackout. Her voice trembled despite decades of experience. "We are about to lose visibility on the most significant object we have ever observed," she said. "For 6 weeks we will know nothing." It was not fear she expressed, but something deeper, the discomfort of complete blindness in a moment when sight mattered most. NASA Isa Roskosmos. CNN's Every major space agency scrambled to salvage what little observation capability they could. Satellites were tilted beyond safe angles, radio arrays pushed to their limits, deep space tracking networks reconfigured in desperation. Yet everyone knew the truth once. 3A Atlas passed behind the sun, it would vanish into a curtain of fire. Those final hours before disappearance felt strangely ceremonial. Amateur astronomers across the world watched until their equipment could no longer tolerate the heat glare. Scientists shared last-minute predictions, last-minute concerns, last-minute hopes that the object would re-emerge unchanged. And across forums and live streams the same haunting question repeated: what will it become when no one is watching? Because the object had not approached the blackout as a passive rock. It had approached it actively with structures still growing signals, still shifting energy, signatures still evolving. Its behaviour had accelerated, not settled, as though preparing for something the sun itself would shield from the eyes of an entire species. And then it was gone. The world entered a kind of suspended animation. For the first time since its discovery, humanity found itself forced to wait. Without measurement, without observation, without control. What remained was speculation, some hopeful, some terrified, all inadequate. NASA's internal memos leaked in fragments described this period as the longest unmonitored interval of a potential extraterrestrial intelligence in human history. Strategists debated worst-case scenarios. Intelligence agencies quietly activated emergency protocols designed decades earlier for threats no one had defined. Even nations long hostile to each other opened channels for cooperation. All while the sky remained unchanged, hiding a traveller humans could no longer see. Solar physicists attempted to detect indirect clues, tiny fluctuations in the current of faint distortions in magnetic field lines, anything that might suggest activity. But the sun is a noisy beast. Its storms drown all whispers. If 3A Atlas was doing something behind that chaos, it left no trace discernible to human instruments. Amateur astronomers did not accept helplessness easily. Thousands organised into global monitoring networks, not because they could see the object, but because monitoring the sun felt like the closest thing to watching. They studied coronal mass ejections, solar wind flux, and radiative anomalies with a kind of devotional intensity. To many it felt almost spiritual, guarding the only doorway through which 3I Atlas might reappear. Religious communities interpreted the blackout in their own ways. Some called it a test of patience, others a moment of cosmic judgment. Some described it simply as mystery, a reminder that knowledge expands only through periods of unknowing. Silence itself can be a teacher. Meanwhile, the psychological impact of the blackout was undeniable. Anxiety increased worldwide. News cycles filled with speculation. Markets fluctuated violently. Politicians attempted reassurance without any information to offer. And scientists, normally bastions of calm, found themselves pacing hallways late into the night, grappling with the discomfort of absolute ignorance. The deeper fear was not that the object would change. It was that it would change and humans would not know how. Some researchers believed the blackout offered the perfect moment for deployment, small probes released like seeds drifting into the solar wind. Others feared the object might alter its trajectory, emerging at a different angle entirely. A more optimistic minority suggested that the object was using the sun's interference to conduct an internal transformation, absorbing energy, reconfiguring its structures, preparing for whatever phase came next. The possibility that 3I Atlas might emerge quiet after so much activity frightened some scientists more than any flamboyant display would have. Intelligence does not always reveal itself loudly. Sometimes it withdraws into silence before its most decisive action. As the days passed, the absence grew heavier. It was not just an observational gap, it was an experiential one. Human beings were not accustomed to witnessing the evolution of a visitor, then suddenly losing sight of it at the most critical moment. It inspired a kind of existential vertigo, the sense of standing on the edge of something vast and unknowable. And then, as October turned to November, a subtle shift occurred in the tone of discussions across scientific circles. The panic softened into something more reflective. A recognition emerged that this moment, this forced stillness, was part of the story. Observers began to see the blackout as a natural interlude, a cosmic pause written into the sequence from the beginning. Whether by design or coincidence, the universe had offered a reminder even in an age of data, humans are not entitled to clarity. Some mysteries unfold in light, others in darkness. In the end, the only certainty was that 3i Atlas would return to view. What it would become and what it would reveal was a question suspended over the planet like a second invisible moon. And as the world waited quietly, breath held beneath the same star that hid the visitor, one truth settled into human consciousness with gentle inevitability. Sometimes the universe teaches through disappearance. There are truths in astronomy that arrive gently like a slow sunrise, and then there are truths that land with the weight of inevitability, not because they are dramatic, but because they leave no room for denial. The revelation that 3i Atlas was following a trajectory with a probability of only 0.05% of occurring naturally belonged firmly to the latter category. It was a truth that settled on the scientific community not as shock, but as quiet mathematical certainty. Dr. James Chen, an expert in astronavigation at MIT, described the discovery not as a moment of excitement, but as one of stillness. He remembered staring at the statistical output as if it were a sentence he had read before in some forgotten dream or long-lost lecture. The numbers don't shout, he later said. They whisper, and sometimes what they whisper is more frightening than anything imagination can produce. The whisper in this case was simple. 3i Atlas was not drifting. It was aiming. The object's approach toward Venus, Mars, and Jupiter followed a pattern so deliberate, so impossibly optimized, that randomness ceased to be a defensible explanation. Astronomical objects do not thread themselves through gravitational corridors with the precision of engineered spacecraft. They tumble, wander, and sway under the influence of subtle forces. Even Oumuamua, once suspected of artificial origin, behaved erratically, its path shaped by faint jets of escaping gas. But 3i Atlas behaved differently. Its approach to Venus at 0.220, then Mars at 0.19 AU, then Jupiter at 0.36 AU formed a sequence so clean it resembled a survey plan. Not rushed, not cautious, simply intentional. It moved like a scholar reading planets, the way one reads ancient texts, turning each page with measured patience. Dr. Chen compared the trajectory to a dart thrown across continents. Imagine he told a closed-door briefing standing in New York and throwing a dart that hits a bullseye in London. Then it ricochets and hits bullseyes in Paris and Rome, all without losing momentum. Such precision at interplanetary scale defied natural explanation. And more importantly, it suggested motive. This was not a stone passing through. It was a visitor conducting reconnaissance. The data overwhelmed traditional models. Early calculations assumed randomness, but randomness required chaos. And there was no chaos in the object's movement. The trajectory minimized energy use, maximized planetary visibility, and positioned the object to gather data about the inner solar system, while exposing itself to human observation only as much as necessary. Worse yet, the arrival vector hinted at strategy. 3i Atlas approached from the direction of Sagittarius, where dense star fields obscure incoming bodies. The region acts as a natural cloak. An object arriving from that direction could avoid detection, until the last possible moment precisely what happened. This made some scientists deeply uncomfortable. It suggested an intelligence that not only understood celestial mechanics, but also understood us. It approached in a way that exploited the blind spots of Earth's detection systems. Not to avoid detection entirely, but to delay it. Strategists and analysts quietly entered the conversation. Some argued that the object's behavior resembled reconnaissance missions conducted by terrestrial militaries. Approach quietly, gather data quickly, limit exposure, then transition to the next phase. Yet even as these comparisons emerged, there was a shared recognition. If 3i Atlas was conducting a survey, its methods surpassed human capability by centuries. Others took a different approach, focusing not on the object's potential motives but on its choreography. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, who had once described its geometric structures as beautiful, now turned to language of orchestration. This trajectory is music, she said. It has rhythm. It has harmony. Whoever plotted this path did so with the same elegance that a composer writes a symphony. Was that metaphor too poetic? Or was it the only language capable of expressing the scale of intelligence implied by the trajectory? Even among skeptics, the elegance of the path became hard to ignore. If randomness produces noise, then intention produces pattern, and 3 Syrskje Atlas moved like a pattern through space. As debates intensified, amateur astronomers again played an unexpected role. Thousands of them ran their own orbital models, some using nothing more than home-built software. Their calculations consistently reproduced the same conclusions. The trajectory was too precise, too smooth, too consistent with intentional design. This decentralized verification made denial untenable. When independent minds across continents reach the same improbable truth, the universe feels suddenly closer and far more alien. The deeper analysis revealed something more unsettling. The timing of the planetary flybys maximized the scientific value of each encounter. Venus offered atmospheric data, Mars offered surface and magnetic insights, Jupiter offered gravitational leverage and a view of its massive magnetosphere. The sequence mirrored the logic of an intelligence studying the architectural layers of a solar system atmosphere, geology, magnetism, gravity, a planetary curriculum. Some wondered if Earth had been included in the syllabus. The philosophical implications multiplied. If the trajectory was a reconnaissance mission, when had the mission begun millions of years ago? Or was this only one path in a network of paths, each probe traversing other systems, other suns, collecting data from civilizations that would never know they had been observed? Dr. Robert Kim at Stanford raised a question that lingered with a heaviness few could shake. If this is reconnaissance, then what comes after reconnaissance? But not all interpretations lean toward fear. Some scientists suggested that the mission might be peaceful, a cosmic survey, akin to the Voyagers, but conducted by a civilization vastly older than ours. If humans send probes out of curiosity, might not others do the same? And if an intelligence has mastered gravity, matter, and energy, perhaps it has long outgrown war. Perhaps the trajectory was not a threat, but a gesture, a cartographer mapping worlds, not conquering them. Still, even a peaceful map maker can unsettle those being mapped. As October progressed, and 3I Atlas continued its glide towards solar conjunction, the 0.1% probability settled like a quiet truth across the planet. People stopped arguing about whether the object was natural. That debate had ended. The only remaining question, the one that whispered through observatories and living rooms alike, was why it had come. And beneath that, a softer, more vulnerable truth emerged. The universe is not empty. It is aware. And something aware had entered our solar system with a trajectory as deliberate as handwriting on a page. There are moments in science when questions become more dangerous than answers. By early October 2025, the debate surrounding 3 Atlas had crossed that threshold. What began as an academic disagreement about an unusual interstellar object slowly transformed into something sharper, a philosophical fracture line running through universities, observatories, and entire disciplines. It was no longer about data alone, it was about meaning. The catalyst was a single idea, the possibility that 3 Atlas might represent not peaceful exploration, not passive observation, but the logic of the dark forest. The theory popularized through fiction, yet grounded in cold mathematical reasoning, proposes that the universe is silent not because it is empty, but because it is cautious. In a cosmic forest where every civilization fears destruction, silence becomes survival. To reveal oneself is to risk annihilation, and to detect another civilization is to face a choice: respond, hide, or strike preemptively. Against that backdrop, the behavior of 3I Atlas gained new weight. Dr. Adam Hibbard, a researcher at the Initiative for Interstellar Studies, published a paper that triggered the academic rupture. His argument was sober, not sensational. He noted that the object's trajectory resembled reconnaissance, that its behavior matched strategic caution, and that its silence might not be a void but a boundary, a deliberate withholding. Avi Loeb, always willing to explore uncomfortable possibilities, lent his name to the discussion. And just like that, the scientific conversation changed shape. Within days, institutions responded defensively. NASA and ESA released statements warning against premature speculation. Senior astronomers argued that invoking dark forest models risked igniting public fear. Yet their objections were strangely non-specific. They did not refute calculations or disprove observations. Instead, they seemed to recoil at the implications. Meanwhile, younger scientists and independent researchers found themselves drawn to the discussion, not because they wanted catastrophe, but because the data no longer fit the safe narratives. The object's precision, its evolving structures, its strategically concealed arrival vector, all of it looked deliberate. And if it was deliberate, then the question of motive was unavoidable. Even those who rejected the dark forest hypothesis admitted privately that 3I Atlas behaved less like a comet and more like a quiet intelligence slipping through the solar system with intent. The academic war intensified quickly. Conferences became battlegrounds. Peer review panels fractured. Social media magnified every disagreement until the lines between scientific critique and personal attack disappeared. It was strange, surreal, almost painful. Brilliant individuals trained in logic and cautious language were suddenly speaking like philosophers, cornered by a truth they were not ready to articulate. For many, the discomfort came not from fear of alien hostility, but from fear of intellectual humility. The dark forest interpretation forced humanity to acknowledge a possibility that was psychologically intolerable, that Earth was not simply observed, but evaluated. Dr. Elena Vasquez, whose earlier trajectory paper had sparked the first wave of controversy, was pulled reluctantly into the debate. Her emails, already scrutinized, became ammunition for both sides. One group pointed to her warnings of precision navigation as evidence of intelligence. The opposing camp accused her of fueling speculation, yet Vasquez herself remained steady. "The data suggests intelligence," she said softly during a rare interview. "It does not yet suggest hostility. We must not conflate fear with evidence." It was a sentence that captured the paralysis of the moment. Everyone feared the wrong thing, some feared panic, others feared silence, and many feared the implications of admitting ignorance. The philosophical community soon joined the chaos. Ethicists debated the responsibilities of a younger civilization encountering a potentially older one. Some invoked caution, others invoked curiosity. A few asked uncomfortable questions. If the dark forest model is true, does humanity have the moral right to exist loudly? Should a noisy civilization be silent? Theologians, too, offered interpretations. Some viewed 3I Atlas as a test of humility. Others wondered if it represented an intelligence so old that human concepts of threat and morality were irrelevant. The Vatican issued a statement acknowledging that the universe might harbour intelligences beyond human comprehension, while urging calm contemplation rather than fear. As the debate deepened, the behaviour of 3I Atlas grew more symbolic. The object remained silent, offering no clarification. Its structures expanded with inscrutable purpose. Its signals fluctuated without revealing meaning. Every ambiguity became a canvas on which scientists projected their fears or hopes. But the silence itself, that vast cosmic quiet, felt like a reminder that the universe has never been obligated to explain itself. In the midst of this tension, some scholars offered a gentler interpretation. Perhaps intelligence, regardless of origin, does not communicate in recognizable patterns, because communication itself is shaped by evolution, environment, and perception. A mind forged under a different star might not fear silence. It might be silence. Yet even these voices acknowledged that 3 Atlas behaved with something akin to intentional restraint. It revealed only what it needed to. It acted only when necessary. It observed but carefully. It adjusted but minimally. It was either cautious, indifferent, or simply unknowable. Meanwhile, social media became a swirling vortex where every theory, credible or absurd, found an audience. Some people embraced fear, others embraced awe. Many simply wandered between those emotions, suspended in uncertainty. Humanity had never encountered a mystery so vast and so close. And perhaps that was the deepest truth hidden beneath the academic battles. 3I Atlas had exposed a vulnerability that human civilization rarely confronts: the fragility of its assumptions. For centuries, humans believed silence meant emptiness. They believed intelligence would announce itself clearly. They believed the universe was vast enough to make humanity irrelevant. But 3i Atlas challenged all three beliefs simultaneously. It showed silence could be strategy. It showed intelligence could be subtle. And it showed that the universe might not be indifferent after all. By mid-October, exhaustion settled across scientific communities. The war of ideas had reached saturation. Researchers realized that no argument, no model, no theory could outpace the object itself. The only arbiter that could resolve the debate was 3i Atlas, and it had chosen not to speak. In that quiet, a strange peace began to form. Some scientists turned away from fear, recognizing that the dark forest theory, while provocative, was not destiny. Others accepted that humans might never fully understand the motives of a visitor shaped by physics, older than human history. And a few, perhaps the most honest, admitted they were watching, not with terror, but with wonder. A cosmic visitor had arrived, and humanity had been given front-row seats to a question older than civilization. In the end, the academic war illuminated more about humanity than about 3i Atlas. It revealed human fear, pride, hope, and the desperate desire to find meaning in the dark. But above all, it showed that humanity was still learning how to face the unknown with grace. And somewhere behind the sun's blinding light, 3i Atlas continued its silent journey, untouched by arguments, untroubled by theories, moving with a patience that no human mind could match. There are nights when the universe feels closer than it should, as if leaning over our shoulders with a quiet curiosity. October 3rd, 2025 became one of those nights. As 3i Atlas approached Mars, humanity prepared to witness something no generation before had ever seen an interstellar visitor acting with purpose. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in front of the glowing screens in mission control, her face washed in pale blue light. Behind her, the room hummed, with a restless silence, the kind that comes when data is about to change everything. For months, doubts had been whispered, dismissed, then quietly revived. Was 3i Atlas navigating with intelligence, or were humans projecting meaning onto noise? Tonight Mars would answer. 6 orbiters circled the red planet waiting. 2 rovers listened from the cold dust, and telescopes far from Earth aligned themselves like patient sentinels. They were different machines with different missions, but in this moment they shared a single intention to watch an object that should have been nothing more than ice and stone, yet behaved like neither. The first anomaly arrived as a whisper in the data. ESA's Mars Express detected thermal pulses, small, rhythmic, impossibly organised. Dr. Angela Martinez zoomed into the patterns, her breath catching. Heat was moving across the object's surface like breath expanding through metal. It was subtle, precise, and unmistakably intentional. Then the images sharpened. Structures appeared, angled surfaces, repeating geometry panels, rotating with mathematical accuracy. These were not fractures or shadows or tricks of distance. They were mechanisms unfolding like instruments preparing for work. Even before the scientists spoke, everyone felt it. This was design, not accident. When NASA's HiRISE camera locked onto the object, the truth grew clearer. HiRISE could see details smaller than a room, and what it captured made the room fall silent. Surfaces gleamed with symmetry. Sections shifted, retracted, aligned. Over the course of several frames, 3i Atlas adjusted its entire posture, as if bracing for analysis. And then something even stranger, the largest dish-like structure, rotated and locked onto Mars. Not Earth, not the Sun. Mars. As though the planet were an open book and the object had finally reached its chapter. The trace gas orbiter detected ultra-low frequency pulses reflecting off the Martian atmosphere. Not communications, not noise. They resembled probing sweeps mapping density, testing composition, sampling the invisible layers above the planet. And then came the ground response. Perseverance recorded faint fluctuations in atmospheric particles. Curiosity detected strange variations in magnetic drift. Too faint to identify, too synchronous to ignore. When China's Tianwen-1 transmitted its data, any remaining doubts evaporated. One of the object's panels rotated sharply, a perfect 90-degree motion, followed by an electromagnetic ripple across Mars's magnetosphere. A cause. then an effect, movement followed by a planetary response. The sequence was unmistakable. This was an experiment. Signals from Earth's radio telescopes began to paint the same pattern. During each structural adjustment, a corresponding electromagnetic signature emanated from the object. It was as if 3-eye Atlas were communicating with itself, coordinating, calibrating, synchronizing each component for maximum observational yield. All of it pointed to the same conclusion: the object had come here to study Mars. Yet the most haunting detail wasn't the machinery or the geometry, it was the timing. Every scan was perfectly aligned, with optimal mapping windows synchronized with Mars's rotation, atmospheric clarity and solar positioning. It moved like a machine that had run this procedure before, as though Mars was familiar to it, as though it already knew what to expect. And throughout the observation window it behaved with serene indifference to the spacecraft watching it. Not evasive, not reactive. It simply continued its work, silent and focused like a scientist lost in thought. By hour 6, consensus formed quietly across mission control rooms on 3 continents. 3 Atlas was not drifting. It was operating. Every sweep, every shift, every pulse fit into a pattern too deliberate to deny. Mars had become a subject. And the interstellar visitor behaved like an observing intelligence. The public would hear only fragments, unusual features, unexpected activity, ongoing analysis. But those in the room felt the truth settle into them like cold air. This was no comet, no natural wanderer. It was something engineered, something ancient, something carrying out a mission shaped long before humans named their first planets. As the flyby ended, the object pulled away from Mars with the same calm, gravity-defying grace it had arrived with. No triumphant revelation, no dramatic flourish, just silent continuation, as if checking off one more step in a sequence older than human civilization. Scientists stared at the fading telemetry, knowing they had witnessed more than data. They had seen intention, not hostility, not communication. Something quieter, more unsettling competence. A level of precision that placed humanity in a humbling perspective, like children peering through a keyhole into a room built by minds far older and far more patient. Tonight the universe whispered again, and once more humanity could only listen. There are moments in astronomy when the universe stops behaving the way it should, and the human mind must decide whether to cling to what it knows or step quietly into the unknown. That moment arrived on July 21st, 2025, when Hubble sent back an image so ordinary at first glance, a comet's tail drifting across the dark yet so deeply wrong that it forced scientists to reconsider the rules they had spent their lives trusting. The dust was pointing the wrong way. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, who had spent decades studying comets, watched the data unfold in silence. She knew the physics by heart: dust tails form as sunlight pushes particles away from the nucleus, always stretching outward from the sun like a faint echo. But in the images before her, 3 Atlas betrayed none of those rules. Instead, its tail leaned inward, curling against the flow of radiation, as if ignoring the star that governed every other body in the system. It was like watching smoke move toward a flame. The anomaly should have been a glitch, a calibration error, a temporary distortion. Yet the measurements held steady through repeated checks, through new images, through fresh angles and filters. It didn't matter what wavelength they observed. The tail still pointed the wrong way. Something was pushing the dust or pulling it in defiance of every natural force. Walsh zoomed deeper into the data, adjusting exposure, isolating particles, mapping vectors. The deeper she went, the clearer the pattern became. The particles weren't drifting randomly. They were aligning, organizing, moving as if guided by invisible instructions. Comets do not behave with intention. But this one did. As more observatories confirmed the anomaly, a quiet unease spread through the astronomical community. Some dismissed it as an electromagnetic oddity. Others muttered about unknown solar interactions. But those who stayed late in their offices staring at the growing archive of images began to accept a possibility that felt both impossible and strangely inevitable. The tail was being manipulated. When radio telescopes joined the observation campaign, the mystery deepened. Subtle electromagnetic fluctuations emerged from the region near the anti-tail pulses that repeated with a stability no natural system should maintain. The signals weren't strong enough to decode, but they were too clean to dismiss. They had order, rhythm, a mathematical calm. Walsh, always cautious, found herself writing words she never imagined placing in a scientific log. The observed vector deviations appear deliberate. She stared at the sentence for a long time before saving the file. Even then, she wasn't sure whether she had crossed a professional boundary or simply acknowledged what the data insisted on revealing. More troubling than the direction of the dust was the structure that seemed to anchor it. Early images had shown nothing unusual, a blur, a nucleus, the expected haze. But as resolution improved, faint edges began to appear. Angles, lines, surfaces too sharp to be natural. At first, the structures looked like artifacts' errors introduced by filters or movement, but they persisted across instruments, across continents, across orbits. The tail wasn't just responding to these structures, it appeared to be shaped by them, guided, moulded, like a plume redirected by a hand. At a closed meeting of senior astrophysicists, the discussion shifted from what is happening to what is this thing built from spectroscopic analysis revealed metallic compounds that no comet should contain in meaningful quantities. Their absorption lines resembled alloys engineered rather than forged by cosmic chaos. There were traces of elements rare even in supernova debris arranged in ratios that suggested intentional composition. A comet should be a relic, frozen dust, ancient rock, the leftover breath of a long dead star. But 3 Atlas behaved like an instrument, an apparatus, something constructed for a purpose. Still many resisted the growing implication. Humans fear being wrong almost as much as they fear the unknown. But as always, the universe cared nothing for their reluctance. It simply continued to reveal. Then came the most unsettling discovery. When the dust tail reversed direction, Hubble caught faint ripples moving outward from the nucleus waves of energy that pulsed in time with the structural shifts. It was as though the object were issuing commands to the dust cloud around it, shaping its environment with the ease of breath shaping fog. The images sparked arguments, denials, late-night calls, emergency conferences. But through all the noise, a single realization echoed beneath the surface. This was not passive behavior. This was interaction. A comet does not instruct its own tail, but a device might. Some scientists suggested magnetic manipulation, but the required field strength exceeded known natural limits. Others proposed plasma interactions, but the patterns were too clean, too controlled. It wasn't turbulence, it was choreography. One researcher whispered during a video call, "It's steering the dust." And though no one responded, no one disagreed. Beyond the technical confusion, a quieter question lingered. Why? What purpose could such a mechanism serve? Was it a sensor, a shield, a signalling method, or something far stranger, a communication channel written not in radio or light, but in the motion of matter itself? The more the object revealed, the less it resembled anything born of gravitational collapse or solar erosion. Humanity had catalogued thousands of comets, each one imperfect, chaotic, carved by radiation and chance. But this visitor seemed untouched by randomness. Every anomaly pointed to intention, to design, to a system operating with goals beyond human comprehension. The anti-tail had become a message, whether meant for humans or not. And the message was simple. This object is not what you believe it to be. As Walsh prepared the next observation schedule, she paused for a long moment, watching the silent forms drifting across her screen. In the vast darkness far from Earth, something was moving with a patience older than human history. Something precise. Something awake. Tonight, as she powered down the monitors and let the lab fall back into darkness, she whispered the truth she still could not publish. Some mysteries aren't meant to obey us. And beyond the glass, the universe continued to think in silence. There are discoveries that arrive quietly, slipping into scientific literature like faint ripples on a dark lake. And there are discoveries that detonate. The massive 3i Atlas belonged to the second kind. It started with a calculation, a simple one, at least in theory: mass trajectory acceleration. The equations were familiar, the sort every astrophysicist could write blindfolded, and yet the numbers refused to behave. Dr. Richard Kett had recalculated the dataset 3 times before realizing the results would not bend to expectation. Working beside Avi Loeb and Peter Vespasian, he had fed months of tracking data into his models, expecting a minor anomaly, perhaps a slight misreading of outgassing, perhaps an issue with sunlight pressure. Instead, the object behaved as though the universe's laws were mere suggestions, not obligations. 3I Atlas should have been drifting under the influence of subtle forces, losing mass, shifting direction, wobbling slightly like every other comet humanity had ever observed. But the observation showed something else. The object resisted every expected nudge. It moved with a precision so rigid it resembled an object insulated from the cosmos itself. The first shock was the outgassing rate. Instruments detected 150 kilograms of material per second, blasting from the surface expelled at hundreds of meters per second. Such violent jets should have altered the trajectory measurably, sending the object veering ever so slightly off its gravitational path, but the deviation never came. It continued on the exact trajectory predicted by basic Newtonian gravitation. No drift, no wobble, not even the smallest tremor. To produce such stability, the mass of 3I Atlas had to be colossal, far beyond anything expected for an object only a few kilometers across. The calculation was unavoidable: 33 billion tons. Heavier than any mountain, denser than neutron star crust. It was a figure so absurd that Kett had stared at it in silence, feeling the air in the room thin around him. When he finally spoke the number aloud during a private meeting, the room fell silent. Someone whispered, "That can't be right." Someone else whispered, "Then what is it?" What indeed? Dr. Maria Gonzalez from the European Space Agency reviewed the analysis and found the same impossible truth. No known natural material could sustain such density in interplanetary space. No ordinary matter could compress itself so deeply without collapsing. To maintain that mass, the object must contain something exotic, something engineered. That possibility shifted the conversation. The scientists were no longer asking what 3I Atlas was made of, but who had made it. The next revelation came from gravitational modelling. If the mass truly reached 33 billion tons, then the object should have exerted detectable influence on spacecraft, asteroids and debris across its path. Tiny perturbations should have rippled through local orbits, but no such disturbances appeared. Gravity seemed to ignore the object. Or perhaps the object was hiding its gravity. That idea, gravity masking, did not belong to ordinary physics. It belonged to speculation, to theoretical engineering, to technologies that humanity had not even envisioned clearly. Yet every piece of evidence pointed toward controlled gravitational behaviour, as though the object could choose which laws applied to it. Dr. Sarah Kim at Caltech published a paper she never thought she would write. In carefully measured language, she described the implications of controlled gravity, the ability to manipulate planetary motion to reshape matter to stabilize megastructures. The engineering did not merely surpass human capability, it eclipsed it by centuries, perhaps millennia. The scientific community tried to respond with restraint, but restraint grew thin. Something ancient and deliberate was moving through the solar system, carrying a mass that defied comprehension and a silence that felt almost conscious. While physicists debated, others turned toward the signals. Amateur radio operators recorded new bursts, more frequent, more complex. The transmissions danced through frequencies with an intelligence impossible to dismiss. After the mass revelation circulated, new patterns appeared almost as if the object were reacting to human attention. Transmissions pulsed, with Fibonacci sequences, then prime numbers, then geometric harmonics. Analysts noted the timing. The signals intensified during periods when new mass analyses were released. Was it coincidence? A projection of human anxiety? Or was the object listening not to our radios but to our growing awareness that thought lingered like a shadow in every research lab? Theories multiplied. Some spoke of exotic matter. Others whispered about quantum vacuum energy, the idea that 3I Atlas might draw power from the fabric of space itself. Dr. Robert Chen's calculations suggested that the energy required to maintain such mass stability would exceed the output of stars. Yet the object drifted with ease, silent, unhurried. As the implications deepened, governments stepped into the conversation quietly. Space agencies activated monitoring systems that had been dormant since the Cold War. Intelligence networks drafted reports warning of unknown technological capabilities. In private, some officials admitted their fear if the object could mask gravity, what else could it do? Still, through all the chaos, through all the analysis, there was an undeniable stillness in the data. The object did not accelerate. It did not turn. It did not threaten. It simply continued on its path, obeying its own rules, unmoved by human speculation. This was perhaps the most humbling realization. It was not a weapon. It was not a beacon. It was not even a visitor in the human sense. It was a presence, a construct, a traveller in a timeline far larger than ours, following a mission long in motion, before Earth ever evolved eyes to witness it. Scientists whispered the truth to one another in hallways and late-night conference calls. It's not here for us. The weight of that idea pressed on them with a mix of relief and loneliness. Humanity was not the centre of the story. They were bystanders to a machine built for a purpose, older than their species. And yet even in this cosmic insignificance, something strangely comforting emerged. The universe was not empty. Intelligence existed beyond Earth, powerful, ancient, incomprehensibly advanced, and it had passed through the darkness, not with hostility, but with quiet indifference, like a ship gliding past a lighthouse on some forgotten coast. As October unfolded, the mass revelation reshaped everything. Models changed, policies shifted, sleepless nights multiplied, but beneath the fear and awe, a gentler truth remained, one whispered among astronomers who stayed late in their observatories watching the faint trace of the object slide across their screens. "You're not lost in space," they murmured to themselves. "You are part of it." And far beyond, 3i Atlas continued its silent drift, patient and unknowable, carrying the weight of 33 billion tons, and a mystery that asked humanity only to observe, not to solve. There are passages in the sky where even the most advanced observatories fall silent, not because they choose to, but because the universe demands it. October the 29th, 2025 became one of those passages the day 3 Atlas slipped behind the sun and vanished into 6 weeks of radiant concealment, a disappearance predicted by orbital mechanics yet unsettling in its timing, as if coordinated with a precision meant to remind humanity of its limits. Dr. Jennifer Walsh had anticipated the moment with a growing hollowness in her chest. For months she had watched the object evolve from a distant speck into an undeniable artifact, a structure that rearranged itself under the eyes of telescopes, a silence that encoded intention without ever uttering a voice. And now, just when the questions reached their sharpest edge, the sky closed. She stood before the final sequence of images, the object drifting toward the sun's corona luminous structures, still shifting, morphing, almost breathing. She found herself whispering a thought no one dared publish. It knows we cannot see it there. The blackout itself was nothing unusual in astronomy. Mars disappears. Venus disappears. Even Earth's satellites fall out of alignment behind the star from time to time, but none of those bodies carry curiosity with them. None of them vanish while emitting structured signals or assembling metallic geometries. None of them behave like visitors. For 3i Atlas, the blackout felt less like an accident of celestial geometry and more like a curtain deliberately lowered. Space agencies prepared with anxious diligence. NASA recalibrated radio arrays hoping to catch stray transmissions bending around the sun's limb. ESA repositioned satellites burning fuel that had been meant to last years. China released observation predictions with a transparency that startled diplomats. Russia fortified monitoring stations deep within their cold, silent forests. Everyone agreed on one thing: the object would be unreachable, and there is something deeply human about the fear of losing sight of something you barely understand. Visibility is a kind of control, and for the first time since its discovery, humanity was about to lose even the illusion of it. Amateur astronomers, the quiet backbone of discovery, gathered for one last session. They aligned solar scopes, checked filters, prepared to track the faint disturbances in the sun's outer light. Marcus Rodriguez, who had become the accidental conductor of a global network, addressed thousands through a simple video message: "We're blind, but not powerless. The sun may hide it, but the environment around the sun will not lie." His voice trembled slightly. Not with fear, but with awe. In living rooms and rooftops and small observatories built from savings and stubbornness, people prepared to watch the star itself for clues. The cosmos was suddenly a stage, and the performer had stepped behind the brightest curtain imaginable. The final readings came in slowly. Structural growth continued until the last possible minute. Electromagnetic pulses increased in harmonic complexity, as though the object were ramping up for some internal sequence. And then, just as the corona's glare consumed it, the signal stopped. Not faded. Stopped. The silence created a shiver across the scientific world. Dr. Sarah Kim at Caltech described the feeling best in a late-night interview. No news outlet aired in full. "It's not just that it went quiet," she said. "It's that the quiet had timing. Even the sun itself seemed to sense the passage. Minor fluctuations in solar wind shifts, in the coroner strange temperature ripples, all documented, all unexplained. Too subtle to claim confidently. Too synchronized to ignore. Without direct observation, humanity was left with imagination, a dangerous and liberating force. Some feared covert deployment, others whispered about metamorphosis. A few believed it might be sleeping, recharging, or preparing. But more reflective minds held a gentler thought that perhaps the object had reached a phase of its mission that simply did not concern humanity. The blackout allowed it privacy the way night allows a seed to split open underground. As days became weeks, unease spread across Earth. Markets trembled, religions interpreted, governments speculated. The public clung to live streams showing nothing but solar light, hoping for patterns hidden within the noise. And yet, amid all the fear, there was a quiet beauty in the forced stillness. For the first time in generations, the world looked toward the same place in the sky, not for spectacle, but for understanding. The sun, ancient witness to all things living, had become a veil drawn gently over a mystery too bright for premature revelation. Scientists tried to prepare the public. This was expected, predictable, ordinary in a mathematical sense. But mathematics does not soothe the mind when uncertainty grows roots in the imagination. Behind the sun, three-eye Atlas drifted through fire and radiation, untouched, unobserved, unjudged. If it changed form, humanity would not know. If it released probes, no instrument would detect them. If it shed its outer layers like a chrysalis, the transformation would remain a story told only between the object and the star. 6 weeks of silence. 6 weeks of wondering whether the universe was rearranging itself just out of sight. And in that silence, a strange calm settled over those who studied the object most deeply. Walsh felt it. Kim felt it. Even the amateur astronomers felt it, an acceptance that some moments in the cosmos are meant to unfold, unseen like chapters, written in darkness because their meaning is not yet ready for the light. Sometimes the universe whispers by disappearing. As the blackout deepened and Earth waited for the object to re-emerge, a quiet understanding began to spread among all who watched the sky. It's all right to not understand. It's all right to wait. The cosmos has never hurried, and it would not begin now. And somewhere behind the blinding fire of the sun, Three-Eye Atlas continued its long, ancient drift, carrying secrets that would return to human eyes only when it chose, or when celestial mechanics allowed. Either way, the silence was part of the story. Traveller. As we reach the dim edge of this cosmic story, the shape of Three-Eye Atlas remains suspended in ambiguity, like a thought the universe has not yet finished forming. We have drifted together through storms of plasma-shifting structures, and 6 weeks of silence behind the sun. And now, standing here at the quiet threshold, we wait with the same hushed anticipation as Jennifer Walsh and every observer watching the sky. For all our calculations, for all our instruments, there are still moments when the universe refuses to answer. That refusal is not rejection, it is invitation. A reminder that some mysteries are meant to unfold slowly, the way a star breathes, or a glacier dreams. Perhaps 3i Atlas is a messenger. Perhaps it is a machine older than memory. Or perhaps it belongs to a realm of physics we have not yet learned to recognize. Whatever the truth may be, its presence has already changed us. It has reminded us that intelligence may not look like us, that silence can carry intention, and that wonder is a form of participation in the cosmos. So rest now, observer. The universe does not require certainty from you. Only attention, only awe. When Thrishi Atlas emerges from its solar veil, we will be here again listening, watching, learning in the dark. Stay curious. Rest well, traveller. The universe will keep watch.